A genius inventor, while messing around, accidentally gets logged out of his life and time travels back to the past. Unexpectedly, he becomes the crown prince of the Joseon dynasty in Korean history. From there, he begins to hack the system, using future technology to reform the country. While other nations are still using oil lamps, his country has electric lights. When they're still using horses for transportation, his nation already has trains. When the enemy soldiers are still wearing fabric armor in battle, his army is equipped with iron armor and 6-barrel guns. Every shot takes down a foe, absolutely dominating the battlefield. Watch how a 9-year-old crown prince turns Joseon into the most powerful dynasty in history. The story begins with our protagonist, Kim Jinho, a genius inventor who can create anything. When he was in middle school, he successfully made a model of a steam engine. By high school, he was forging iron armor like an ancient master craftsman. In college, he built a human-powered plane that didn't need fuel. He made a toy gun that was so strange, it hurt more than a real gun, which almost got him arrested by the Royal Army a few times. However, during an earthquake, Jinho accidentally dropped some explosive materials, and he immediately received a one-way ticket to the past. Jinho woke up in the body of a newborn baby. He soon realized his family in this life wasn't ordinary at all. They were upper class. At first, he thought his parents were just regular nobles. But it turned out they were not only wealthy but also powerful. His father was the crown prince, the future king, the 4th ruler of the Joseon dynasty in Korean history. Our main character was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Truly a king reborn at the finish line. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, Jinho was 4 years old. At this point, the reigning emperor decided to pass the throne to the crown prince. With his father becoming king, Jinho naturally became the crown prince. Like other royal children, Jinho had to start his education from a very young age. But being mentally over 30 years old, he found it infuriating to have to attend basic classes like a kid. To get out of studying, Jinho came up with a plan to use his father to his advantage. In history, King Sejong the Great was known for being a wise ruler who highly valued invention and actively fostered the talents of the nation. Jinho's plan was to gather talented craftsmen, teach them critical future skills and knowledge so that he would gain his father's trust and respect. Ultimately, he would live a life of luxury, reaping the rewards without working. But on the surface, he still needed to appear diligent and studious to earn the trust of others and manipulate them easily. The first step in his plan was to win over the people responsible for teaching him. Because when he reached adulthood, they would hold important positions in the court. More importantly, he needed to train these people to become his loyal servants in the future. Next day, while on his way to his study, Jinho suddenly stopped, catching a whiff of something foul. Curious, he looked around, wondering what could possibly smell so terrible. Then, right in front of him, he spotted a massive pile of dung in the grass. Seriously, he thought, did ancient people just poop wherever they wanted? At that moment, a group of palace maids passed by, bowing to greet the crown prince. Jinho was about to continue on his way. But the foul stench hit his nose again. He turned his head and noticed that, sure enough, the last maid in the group had accidentally stepped in the pile. And her dress was smeared with it. Jinho was fuming. He realized the culprit behind the mess was a maid from the palace. As someone from the modern world, he couldn't tolerate such unsanitary behavior. Determined to prevent this from happening again, Jinho decided to speak with his teachers. On my way here today, he began, I saw a maid with feces on her dress. It's natural for people to relieve themselves. But getting it on their clothes is unacceptable. One teacher argued that clothes not only cover the body, but also represent social status. So some inconvenience was to be expected. But with his modern mindset, Jinho immediately shut the teacher down. With sharp logic, even if a person wears tattered clothes, their virtue will still shine through the world. Don't you see that judging someone's status based on their clothing is outdated? The teachers were speechless. Realizing they couldn't argue with him, they quickly changed the subject. This isn't something that can be resolved overnight. Your Highness, do you have any other questions? Jinho cursed them under his breath. Annoyed by their evasiveness, he pressed further. Recently, I read a report about Tsushima Island being invaded. It said that everyone, from nobles to commoners, had to enlist because the defense forces were so inadequate. Why aren't we training a proper navy? Jinho unleashed a torrent of questions, leaving the teachers stammering like they'd been muted. I also want to know why we didn't evacuate the civilians from the island. If you're worried about the Japanese pirates occupying the land, wouldn't it be better to relocate the people to northern Ozen? The more Jinho spoke, the more the teachers began to sweat. They hadn't expected the crown prince to be so knowledgeable about national affairs. But no matter how much Jinho pressed, the old foxes insisted that these were matters beyond their control. Hearing this only made Jinho even angrier. But there was nothing he could do. After that incident, the old scholars started gathering to talk amongst themselves. They were amazed at how intelligent the crown prince was. Even though he was only 5 years old. While most kids at that age were still in kindergarten. He was already outsmarting his tutors. They discussed amongst themselves, saying that if the crown prince was already this intelligent, they should teach him more advanced topics. Once he ascended the throne, he would surely become a wise and brilliant emperor. Meanwhile, Jinho, still in the palace, had no idea. He had just made his life harder for himself. He already hated studying. And now they were going to make him study even more. He was still fuming at the old scholars for their arrogance. According to history, the original owner of this body would die young from overworking. Jinho had planned to start making moves when he turned 15. But given the current situation, he realized he needed to act sooner. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. And now Jinho was 7 years old. Officially crowned the crown prince in front of the entire court. The ancient rituals were overly complicated and tedious, making him feel utterly exhausted. But after years of enduring grueling studies, he had finally secured his rightful position as crown prince. Now, he was allowed to participate in the imperial discussions with his father and the ministers, where he could present a few plans to develop the nation and strengthen its wealth and power. However, the biggest issue was that the royal treasury didn't have enough funds to operate. And even though he had been crowned crown prince, he was still just a 7-year-old kid with no real power. No one would listen to him. Still, he couldn't just sit idly by. He needed to start small. After writing on a sheet of paper, he accidentally smudged ink all over it. "Ah, how annoying," he muttered. No matter how many times he used a brush, he could never get used to it. This era is just too inconvenient. Suddenly, an idea struck him. Ah, that's it. Instead of tackling big reforms, I should start with the little inconveniences. This was just the beginning. Outside, blacksmiths were working with hot iron, shaping it into various forms. This was the military supply division, an imperial facility responsible for producing weapons. As Jinho passed by, the sight filled him with excitement. Just the smell of hot iron lifted his spirits. I miss the smell of metal, he thought. I'll come here more often to get to know the people. A supervising official approached him, bowing deeply to greet the crown prince. Jinho smiled and replied, "Nice to meet you. Thanks to your hard work, the Zoyan fortresses are becoming stronger than ever." The man, Li Chang-ho, was the overseer of the military supply division. Humbled by the prince's praise, he replied, "It is my honor, your highness." Jinho cleared his throat and got to the point. "I'm here for something specific. Who's the best craftsman with gold and steel here?" Li Chang-ho was taken aback. "Gold and steel, your highness?" He pondered for a moment before responding. "There is someone who might be able to help." After hearing what Li Chang-ho said, Hyang summoned the skilled blacksmith. As soon as the man saw the crown prince, he knelt down and bowed deeply, saying, "This humble servant greets your highness, the crown prince." Hyang responded, "Humble? Oh, don't say that. How could someone working at the military supply division, responsible for fortifying the defenses of Ozen, be considered humble?" The blacksmith quickly replied, "Your grace is truly boundless." Hyang then took out a scroll and said, "Come closer. I have something I'd like to ask of you." He placed the blueprint on the table and asked, "Can you make this?" The blacksmith looked at the sketches, puzzled, and asked, "What is this?" Hyang placed his hand on the table and explained, "It's a replacement for the traditional brush." The blacksmith's face showed clear astonishment. "It looks like something that can hold ink inside and release it when writing. But the most important part seems to be controlling the amount of ink that flows out with each stroke," he speculated. Hyang was thrilled that the blacksmith had grasped his idea. Exactly. In addition, there needs to be a rounded tip at the end of the nib, to prevent too much ink from soaking into the paper. Also, can you make the slit where the ink flows out as narrow as possible? The blacksmith replied, honestly. If I give it my best effort, I think I can make it about 5 mo wide. Hyang began calculating in his head. 5 mo? A kai is about 3 centimeters.
So that's 1/10 of that. Around 0.15 millimeters? And you can achieve that by hand? Hyang added.
In fact, you'll need to make a lot of these pens. And they need to be completed as quickly as possible.
Not over the course of a month.
Since the pen tips will come into contact with water.
We'll need to use gold and silver instead of iron. To prevent rust, the pens will be made from thinly hammered sheets. If we make the molds correctly, we could produce 20 pens a day.
The blacksmith pointed to the drawing and said, the main issue is the slit.
Hyang continued to discuss the details with the blacksmith.
When writing, the line should be as thin as a strand of hair.
Hyang thought to himself.
Around the size of a mechanical pencil tip, maybe 0.5 millimeters.
Should be fine.
After some calculations, the blacksmith came up with a specific measurement. Then I'll make the slit about 1 gi wide.
Hyang seriously asked. How long do you think it will take? The blacksmith answered. If you give me 2 days. Hyang quickly responded. I'll give you 3. Bring me your best finished product. The blacksmith eagerly accepted the order. I obey. Your Highness. 3 days later. Right on time. The blacksmith presented Hyang with the finished product.
I made 5 nibs, each with a different line thickness.
Please try them out and choose the one you like best. He said. Hyang attached the nib to the pen body and nodded. He gently dipped the nib into the ink tray.
And made a swift stroke across the paper. The nib produced a fine, elegant line, exceeding his expectations.
Hyang smiled brightly. While the 2 craftsmen stood in awe. I really like it. You did a fantastic job. Hyang praised. It's all thanks to your guidance. Your Highness.
The blacksmith replied humbly. After testing all the nibs,
Hyang gave his order.
Then make 100 more with this line thickness. And keep 10 of them in excellent condition.
The blacksmith immediately complied. Of course. Your Highness. Hyang then added. And can you engrave plum blossoms on the nib of this gold pen? Without hesitation. The blacksmith responded. Certainly. Your Highness. Hyang. Excited. Asked. How long will that take? The blacksmith confidently replied. Just 10 days will be enough. Your Highness. Hyang. Being careful. Reminded him. I'll give you 2 extra days. But there should be no defects. I'll be introducing this to my father. The blacksmith. Gong. Bowed deeply and pledged. I swear there will be no defects. Your Highness.
Hyang added one more important thing.
By the way, I'd appreciate it if you kept this project a secret. Until I introduce it to my father. Gong quickly replied. As you command. Your Highness.
After finishing their discussion,
Hyang swiftly left. Li Chang-ho, watching from behind, remarked. His Highness is truly mature for his age. Gong agreed. Yes.
I've heard he's only just turned 8 this year.
But the way he speaks and acts is like that of a 30-year-old? Li Chang-ho turned and asked. Putting that aside, you must have realized something by now. Isn't it great to be the best craftsman in Ozen?
It turned out that Gong had received a certificate of recognition.
Personally awarded by Crown Prince Hyang. He cherished the gift greatly. I'll need to find a carpenter to make the best frame for this. It's definitely something worth keeping as a family heirloom. Finally, the nibs requested by Hyang were completed.
With intricate plum blossom designs engraved on them. The pen moved smoothly across the paper,
producing incredibly fine lines. When Emperor Young and Ion tried it, he was amazed. This is a truly remarkable tool. 10 out of 10.
In the 3rd year of S.Y. Young's reign, the Crown Prince introduced the golden pen to the king.
The Emperor, after testing it, couldn't stop praising it.
The wrist and arm feel so comfortable when writing with this pen.
And it looks beautiful even when writing quickly.
The Crown Prince has created something truly admirable.
Hyang humbly responded. You're too kind, Father. The Emperor then ordered.
The historians must record what the Crown Prince has done today. The historian bowed and acknowledged.
Yes. Your Majesty.
Emperor Young gazed at the pen for a long time.
You've done something truly remarkable. Crown Prince. he said. Then he noticed something special. Is this a plum blossom? He asked. Hyung quickly replied. Yes. It's engraved on the nib because it's the symbol of the royal family. The more Hyung explained, the more pride the emperor felt. Excellent. But how did you come up with the idea for this invention? As expected, the king asked about the reason why the crown prince created this tool. Hyung paused for a moment, thinking to himself. Here it comes. Using his wits, he answered. One day, when father was dipping his brush into the ink, I noticed something unusual. The emperor raised an eyebrow. Unusual? Hyung continued. I saw the ink being absorbed by the bristles of the brush. Normally, water flows downward. But what I saw was the opposite. How could I not find that fascinating? So, I set out to make this. The emperor was impressed with the crown prince's intelligence. Many people have used brushes, but none have thought like you. Isn't this a perfect example of learning through observation? Hyung boldly responded. Thank you for your kind words. Father, I have a request. Speak your mind. The emperor said. Hyung called out. Eunuch. Bring them here. The eunuch appeared, carrying a mysterious box. Yes. Crown Prince. Hyung turned to his father and said. Please grant these gold pens to the historians and the ministers of the court. The emperor, curious, asked. All of these pens? The crown prince proposed. The ministers and officials who need to write quickly should use them. And the historians, who record everything without rest, have a particularly tiring job. I thought they might benefit from something that would help them a little. Everyone's eyes widened in surprise. No one had ever thought to empathize with the work of the historians. The emperor asked for everyone's opinion. I believe the crown prince's idea is excellent. What do you all think? The ministers all agreed with Hyung. We believe the crown prince is right. For someone so young to already be thinking about the well-being of his officials, it's a beautiful thing to see, they said. Finally, the king gave his approval. Distribute the gold pens to the historians and court officials, he ordered. The servants quickly obeyed. Yes, Your Majesty. Throughout the session, the emperor smiled in happiness, and the ministers shared in his joy. His Highness, the crown prince, truly has deep thoughts, they remarked, as Hyung smiled in satisfaction. Not long after, the golden pen Hyung had created sparked a new trend in Joseon. In the third year of Sejong's reign, the crown prince introduced the golden pen to the emperor, who was highly impressed after testing it. The emperor asked why the crown prince had created it, and Hyung explained that seeing the ink rise through the brush bristles gave him the idea for the pen. The emperor praised the crown prince's intelligence and suggested that the ministers and officials who needed to write quickly should use the pen. After Hyung invented the golden nib pen and introduced it to the court, the reaction was overwhelming. The court officials and ministers fell in love with the invention. Everyone kept talking about it. Have you tried the golden nib pen that the crown prince invented? I have. It's truly excellent. One reason it became so popular was that it made writing official documents much easier. Additionally, Hyung created a portable writing board for the generals. When you need to issue urgent orders, this writing board will allow you to write comfortably anywhere. It's the perfect companion to the golden nib pen, he explained. Everyone who used it exclaimed, "This is amazing." Emperor Yunyong was very pleased and ordered the mass production of both items, distributing them to the generals along with the golden nib pens. The golden nib pen that Hyung invented brought significant changes to the kingdom. In the capital, merchants were bustling with business. How much is the total? 2 coins and 3. But for you, I'll only charge 2 coins and 2. That's a bit pricey. Let me borrow some ink and a board. The shopkeeper quickly handed them over. Here you go. The customer tested the pen. Writing Today I'm buying 2 sacks of white rice. He widened his eyes in admiration. So this is the golden nib pen everyone's been talking about? Yes. The shopkeeper replied. This is the pen that the emperor has promoted. With beautiful plum blossom engravings. The man marveled. It's truly beautiful. The customer smiled and added. It's also easy to carry around. And very convenient when I need to write something quickly. Now, I need to bring all the paper I bought today back home. With that, he waved and walked off. And the shopkeeper bowed in return. Take care. As the man disappeared from view, the shopkeeper was still thinking about the golden nib pen. I smell profit in the air. A few days later, during a court session, a minister reported to the emperor. Recently, there's been an unfortunate incident in the market. An unfortunate incident? Speak. The emperor commanded. There are rumors that counterfeit golden nib pens are being sold everywhere. The minister explained. How dare they forge such a valuable item? Especially one bearing the royal symbol. This is an outrage. Punishment must be severe. The officials all agreed in unison. We urge your majesty to punish them strictly. The emperor, remembering Hyang, said. I believe we should consult the crown prince. After all, he is the one who invented the golden nib pen. The eunuch immediately called out. Summon the crown prince. A short while later, Hyang arrived. Father, you called for me? The emperor got straight to the point. The ministers have said that those making counterfeit golden nib pens must be severely punished. I'd like to hear your thoughts. My son. Hyang bowed and replied. Yes. Father. As he furrowed his brow in thought, everyone's eyes were on him, waiting for the young prince's response, admiring how thoughtful he appeared. A few minutes later, Hyang spoke up. Father. May I handle this matter? 1 month passed in the blink of an eye. And the crown prince made his move. Hyang slowly walked into the Ministry of Revenue. Everyone present immediately knelt down and bowed respectfully. Your Highness. We greet the crown prince. They said in unison. Hyang spoke calmly. All right. Do you know why I've called you here? He held up a pen. One of the officials, upon seeing it, went pale. And no one dared to raise their heads. None of us would dare allow our guilds to commit such a treacherous act. One of them said. My guild would never do such a thing. Another chimed in. Hyang glanced at them and replied. I didn't come here to accuse you. Stand up. Sweat dripped down their faces, their bodies trembling. With a sharp slap on the table, Hyang's tone dropped. Don't make me repeat myself. What do you think you're doing? Stand up. Now. As the officials regained their composure, Hyang sat down at the table, speaking with authority. I'll get straight to the point. I intend to grant the production of golden nib pens and regular pens to one of your guilds. However, those who produce golden nib pens will be required to pay 20% of the profits to the court. Additionally, the market price of the pens cannot be more than 60% higher than the production cost. One official hesitantly spoke up. Your Highness. Please pardon me. But there's a problem. He carefully explained. A 60% profit margin sounds like a lot. But when you factor in the wages of the sellers and the makers, we're left with only a 30% profit. And if the court takes 20%, we'll only be left with 10%. At this, Hyang slammed his hand on the table, his face darkening. Are you trying to lie to my face? The official immediately fell silent. Hyang pointed at him and shouted. I said 20% of the 30% profit, which would leave you with around 6%. Not 10%. Take this deceitful, money-blinded fool out of my sight, and revoke his guild's bidding rights. The man froze, stammering. Your Highness. 2 soldiers quickly dragged him away, ignoring his pleas for mercy. Please. Your Highness. I beg you. One official glanced over in fear, and the room was filled with a heavy Oppressive silence. No one dared to say another word. Hyang then spoke. Both His Majesty and I believe
that the merchants and common folk of Ozen are vital.
No one can do everything on their own. Everyone needs help in life.
He stood up abruptly and raised his voice. But if any of you dare lie like he did, you merchants will be seen as nothing but worthless.
Remember that. Everyone bowed deeply and responded in unison. We will remember. Your Highness. After Hyang made his stance clear,
the bidding process for the golden nib pens concluded.
Without any further scheming,
Hyang called the eunuch to meet him in private, a sly smile curling at the corner of his mouth.
You've done very well. Eunuch O. I wouldn't dare. Your Highness,
replied the eunuch,
slightly puzzled. But why did you need to do this? Your Highness. Hyang sighed. You know, I'm still too young. I don't have any other choice. The eunuch nodded in understanding. Indeed. Well then. Your Highness. With your permission, I shall take my leave. Go ahead. Hyang replied. Inside, he felt immense satisfaction. Good. Very good. Everything is going smoothly. Just keep it up. One day. However, an official suddenly spoke up. Your Highness. I Grand Chamberlain Sung have something to report.
He spoke with a stern tone. We can no longer proceed with the Crown Prince's plan.
The official reported this firmly to the Emperor. Your Majesty. I Grand Minister Sung have something important to say. This was the first time Jin Ho, now Hyang,
had faced such political intrigue. He turned to look at the man.
With a resolute expression, Sung said, we cannot continue with the Crown Prince's plan. Your Majesty. Since Hyang's reincarnation,
he had been met with constant praise and laughter,
especially as the treasury had been growing. Everyone had been delighted by the financial success. Since the sale of golden nib pens began,
the financial situation had gradually improved,
bringing in revenue like never before. Thanks to this, King Sejong and the ministers started to pay attention to the positive impact of trade. The emperor lavished praise on Hyang. The crown prince has truly done something wonderful. However,
those who were less fond of the prince
began to gather in secret.
A few conspirators huddled together,
discussing, how can the court turn into a place of business? The merchants will end up becoming the lowest class in society. The emperor and officials are showing too much favor toward them. One said, stroking his beard.
The root of all this stems from the crown prince.
We must act quickly to expose this to the emperor,
or else things will continue down the wrong path.
The group agreed. No matter how intelligent the crown prince is, he's still just a child.
It's a serious mistake to let a child decide such important matters. But before they could complain to the emperor,
the emperor's father, the Grand King Sejong, passed away
on the 10th of May. In the 4th year of Sejong's reign,
Grand King Sejong died at the age of 56. The conspirators had to put their plans on hold. It seems we'll have to wait for the next opportunity, one of them said. And they all agreed. Meanwhile, Hyang was extremely busy. Day and night,
he immersed himself in one book after another.
So, the books from Europe in this era are brought here through China?
With his hands on his hips and a confident expression,
he thought. Hopefully,
this will help address the source of my inspiration.
If I claim all these ideas as my own, they'll become suspicious. Hyang's face darkened.
I need to learn how to deceive them.
2. Everything was going according to plan. During the formal presentation to the court, Hyang explained clearly and logically. That's why I believe it would be much more convenient if these Indian numerals, as the Westerners call them, Arabic numerals,
were used in our country.
What do the ministers think of the Crown Prince's proposal?
Minister of Revenue Kim Jong spoke up.
After careful consideration, I believe that Indian numerals are indeed very useful for representing numbers.
Minister of Rights Hyo Do also agreed. I concur with that assessment.
The emperor quickly made a decision.
With the agreement of these two key ministries,
You are all permitted to use Indian numerals starting next month. If the results are positive,
we will implement them nationwide.
Everyone responded in unison. We obey, Your Majesty.
As the next petition was read,
The emperor said,
I think the crown prince should hear this.
Hyon, confused, replied, Yes, Father.
The emperor rubbed his temples,
Looking weary.
The emperor of the Ming has sent a letter. Emperor Yongle was very pleased with the golden nib pens, and has ordered us to send an additional 10,000 as tribute.
Hyon knew that the royal treasury was not in good shape,
and he quickly began to think.
Suddenly, an idea came to him,
and he proposed.
Father, what if the court were to establish its own guild?
Everyone was shocked at the mention of the word guild.
How could that be? Minister of Rights Hien protested.
The emperor motioned for him to be quiet.
The crown prince has more to say. Continue, he urged Hyon. Hyon began explaining carefully.
Since the emperor of the Ming has requested more pens, it's clear that they are quite popular in the Ming dynasty.
With its vast territory and large population, the number of literate people in Ming must be many times
that of our own nation.
If we collaborate with merchants
to handle the production of golden nib pens,
the number of pens we can sell would far exceed the amount the Ming dynasty is demanding as tribute. The emperor made a thoughtful sound, sinking into deep thought. Minister Kim Jong was already calculating in his mind.
If we base our calculations on that, both the emperor and the minister shared knowing smiles.
We'll surely make a profit. Hyon continued. We can also request that merchants
escort our diplomatic missions to the Ming dynasty.
In return,
the merchants would only need to pay for their lodging expenses. Minister Sun growled in protest.
No, we cannot follow the crown prince's plan. He presented his reasoning. While the crown prince's plan would certainly bring wealth to the court, if we grow too rich, the people will become indulgent in luxury. This could lead to tyranny, and the power of the royal family would no longer be secure.
Another official spoke up.
I, the Minister of Rights, agree with Minister Sun. How could we allow lowly merchants to accompany a diplomatic mission to the Emperor of Ming?
It would tarnish the honor of our nation.
Yashin,
it seems that the crown prince does not yet fully understand state affairs or the policies of our country.
I believe it would be best
for him to focus on his studies and learn to view national matters through the eyes of a true king.
Hyon respectfully asked his father. May I have permission to respond? Father? The emperor nodded. Permission granted. Hyon turned to Grand Minister Sun. Did you say that if we grow wealthy, the people will become indulgent in luxury, and that this will eventually lead to tyranny? Is that correct? Indeed, replied Sun, looking at what has happened in the past.
Before he could finish,
Hyon interrupted. If we look at the past, it was the people
who toiled with their sweat and blood to sustain that luxury.
Are you accusing me of draining the people's sweat and blood? Sun retorted. Didn't I already mention that our goal is to bring wealth from outside? Sun however,
paid no attention to Hyon's words.
Even if this plan yields positive results, there's no guarantee that things will remain peaceful in the future. When something goes wrong, it is the people who will suffer. Hyon directly confronted him. Are you only living for today, Grand Minister? Sun was visibly losing his composure. What did you say? Hyon didn't hesitate to repeat. How can you be so sure that the golden nib pens will only sell once?
The merchants won't stop with just these pens.
Sun frowned. Are there any high-ranking officials using the golden nib pens? At first, many might buy them out of curiosity. But eventually,
the pen will never compare
to the elegance of the traditional brush. It will just become a mere toy. Nothing more.
Minister of Revenue Kim Young intervened.
Grand Minister, you are mistaken. Do you know how many golden nib pens have been sold in just the past month? In the court alone, we've sold 400. And among the common folk,
over 1.000. Sunum was shocked.
In 1 month? How could something so frivolous sell so much? Hyun admitted. I apologize. Perhaps it's considered frivolous because it was created by a child. Me. Sunum quickly bowed, begging. Please forgive me, Crown Prince, for my rashness. Hyun raised his voice. Therefore, for the sake of the people's well-being, our relationship with merchants is truly important. He then called out. Eunuch, bring the book from my study.
The one titled Geography of the World.
A moment later, the book was in the emperor's hands. This is one of the books I collected, thanks to the envoys we sent to the Ming dynasty.
It details the geography and regional products of the Ming dynasty,
as well as its neighboring countries. It also notes that the Ming dynasty and Dai Viet harvest far more crops than Roshan.
They have abundant food reserves as well.
Hyun continued.
Many of our poor people suffer from hunger because our harvests are too meager
due to droughts and spring famines. So, we must use the profits from the envoys to purchase food and provide relief for the people. Once again, Sunum objected. That cannot be.
The righteous path for a king is one where both the ruler
and the people are equally poor and honest, finding joy in simplicity and building virtue through humble living. Hyun raised his voice. Are you saying we should take pride in poverty and find joy in acting virtuously? Have you seen any commoners who truly want to live in poverty and remain virtuous? They are only poor right now. In the summer,
they suffer from droughts.
In the winter, they freeze. In the spring,
they starve to death. In such dire circumstances,
who would praise the virtue of their king? Hyun spoke sternly. There is a saying.
Even a nobleman will jump over a wall if his child goes hungry for 3 days.
No parent can sit idly by
while their children starve.
The king is the father of the people. Shouldn't that father do something for his children? The emperor, visibly excited, exclaimed. My son speaks wisely. No one in the court dared to speak further. The scribes, bewildered, looked around
before hurriedly writing down what had been said.
The emperor cleared his throat,
and many of the court officials who opposed the crown prince's ideas
fell silent. Seeing this, Hyun passionately continued. For the prosperity of Joseon,
and to save the people of this land,
we must act.
Moved by Hyun's words, the emperor once again praised him.
My son speaks wisely. The emperor took a moment to regain his composure, while Hyun, noticing this, continued as everyone waited in silence. Please, continue, said the emperor. Hyun responded. Yes, father.
The ministers and nobles outside the palace
can endure hunger because they understand
why they must endure it
and how to do so. But the commoners lack that knowledge and do not know how to bear hunger. If we wish to educate them, we must at least lessen their hunger first. Don't you think?
The emperor slammed his hand down on the table.
Exactly. Everyone in the court watched in stunned silence. Hyun thought to himself. My father is so worked up. He's about to explode. Let's stop here for today. Hyun continued. Throughout history, it has been said that the will of the people is the will of the heavens. Even if we uphold our virtues, what would the gods think of us if the people are still crying out in misery? Moreover, the people say, man proposes, God disposes. After doing everything in our power, shouldn't we wait and see how the gods respond? Yet, when droughts or plagues strike, the ministers claim
it's because the king has lost his virtue, and demand that the emperor preserve his virtue above all else.
Isn't that contradictory? Hyun then addressed the room.
I know many of you have been officials since before this dynasty was founded.
So why didn't you accuse King Taejo of losing his virtue when he established this dynasty? While being a subject of the Goryeo kingdom? Or my grandfather? King Sejong. Was he unvirtuous for raising his sword against his brothers? Or is my father unvirtuous for ascending the throne instead of his elder brother, the rightful heir? At this, Grand Minister Sungam cried out. Your Highness, the Crown Prince. That's not what we mean. Your Majesty. We have never harbored such vile, treacherous thoughts. We beg your Majesty for mercy. Everyone in the court echoed in unison. Please, Your Majesty, grant us mercy. The Emperor spoke up.
The Crown Prince's words were a bit harsh. I hope the ministers will forgive him.
Next time, be more careful with your words. Hyang quickly responded. I will remember that. Father. The Emperor turned to the ministers. Listen carefully. I also believe that the well-being of the people
is the most important.
Moreover,
the tribute to the Ming Emperor will proceed as the Crown Prince has planned. Everyone bowed their heads and complied with the Emperor's command.
Do you have anything else to add, Crown Prince? Hyang quickly replied. I believe it is more reasonable to pay the people with food for their labor, rather than simply giving them handouts. Father. The Emperor was surprised to hear this. Pay them, you say? Hyang explained in detail. While the lack of rain is a major cause of drought, the absence of irrigation systems and water reservoirs
is also a significant factor.
We must prepare for droughts by constructing reservoirs in every town and repairing the existing ones. I think we can mobilize the people to do this work and pay them with food. In this way, we can alleviate hunger. Isn't this killing two birds with one stone? He then turned to the ministers. What do you think, ministers? All of them agreed. We believe this is an excellent idea. Your Highness. The Emperor gave an order. Crown Prince, return to the palace. Hyang bowed respectfully. Yes. Father. The Emperor suddenly remembered something. And don't forget to prepare for participating in state discussions after the ancestral rites are completed. Thank you, Father, for allowing this young and inexperienced son to join in state discussions. Hyang replied as he turned and left. The Emperor stood up and announced. The court is adjourned for today. Everyone is dismissed. Yes, Your Majesty. They all replied. But before anyone could move, the Emperor added. And one more thing.
His voice grew deeper and more serious.
Perhaps I should also consider. What do you all really think about this dynasty?
The ministers were filled with fear.
Your Majesty. We have never harbored any disloyal thoughts. They all pleaded. Please show mercy. Your Majesty. The Emperor's face darkened. Return to your duties, he commanded coldly. Show mercy. Your Majesty. They echoed as they left the chamber. Once outside,
the ministers whispered among themselves.
One wrong step, and there could be bloodshed. Not only does he carry the blood of King Sejong, but also of the former rulers. Grand Minister Sungam interrupted. Stop speaking nonsense. You all better watch your tongues. I'm only worried about the future of this nation. Is this really how it ends? He let out a sigh.
The others signaled for him to be cautious.
Loose lips sink ships. Don't you know that by now? Sungam sighed again. We've suffered a great loss today. We've underestimated the Crown Prince. Just because he's still young, one of the ministers asked. So what do we do now? Frowning, Sungam replied.
If there's no other option,
we might have to submit a resignation petition. Hearing this, the others were taken aback. Resign? Sungam continued. Yet it is our duty to offer advice. If the emperor goes astray, even the book of documents says, a wise ruler must listen to the voice of the people. I will make sure the emperor remains a wise ruler. His words were laden with hidden meaning. The teacup was set down. I've heard that the crown prince caused quite a stir. In the morning court session, the queen consort remarked. The emperor, exhausted, recounted. The Crown Prince didn't do anything wrong. Quite the opposite.
The boy spoke very accurately. I was the one who caused the commotion. I couldn't control myself.
And I ended up repeating the words I used to say. Back when I was still a Grand Prince.
So, the dignity of my kingship. The queen consort laughed so hard that tears welled up in her eyes.
How unfortunate. I wasn't there to see that side of your majesty. The emperor, embarrassed, quietly muttered. Stop it.
Lady of the Central Palace. I was already so ashamed.
She smiled. Yet your expression is much brighter than before. Don't you think? You didn't even realize it. Did you? She poured more tea into his cup. Feel free to talk comfortably. Besides, there's no need for your majesty
to fear the pens of the scribes.
Is there? Sipping his tea, the emperor replied. You're right. My top priority should be making myself comfortable.
Wise words.
Your Majesty. She praised. The emperor continued.
I also told the Crown Prince that he would be participating
in state discussions after the ancestral rites.
The queen consort felt a hint of concern.
Is that really all right? The Crown Prince is still quite young. Recalling the events of that morning.
And how the boy handled the issue of the golden nib pens.
The emperor mused. With the way he acted this morning.
And how he dealt with the pen issue.
I think it will be fine.
The more I observe him, the more he resembles a man in his 40s.
The queen consort couldn't help but laugh. Not long ago, Your Majesty was worried
that the prince's intelligence
would cause a rift between the two of you. But now,
you seem much more at ease.
The emperor didn't hesitate. That's right. I am at ease now. Back in the palace. The emperor ordered the royal kitchen staff and everyone else to leave. Once he was alone, he let out a deep sigh of relief. Now, should I let them show themselves? Or should I force them out?
His mind was in turmoil.
Should I let things end peacefully? Or should I let blood be spilled? He racked his brain. Many of the officials from my father's time are still in the palace. I need to have loyal ministers.
Officials who only follow my command. When King Sejong's decree was issued, the Ministry of Revenue began manufacturing golden nib pens
to be sent as tribute to Emperor Yongle. However, a serious problem arose during the preparations. The emperor asked, "What did you say? They can't meet the production deadline?"
A court official replied,
"Forgive me, Your Highness,
but the merchant guild responsible for producing the golden nib pens has reported that they are unable to meet the production capacity in time."
Jin Ho pondered. As I expected. Given the current state of the workshops in Joseon,
it's impossible to produce the pens within the deadline.
He then said, "Father, I'd like to confirm something. May I summon the representative of that merchant guild?" Sun immediately objected. This cannot be allowed. How could we summon a mere merchant to discuss state affairs? The emperor calmly responded. Grand Secretary. You knew how I would answer. And that's why you dared interrupt me. Didn't you? Realizing he had overstepped, Sun stammered. Your Majesty. The emperor continued. I understand your loyalty. But why don't you suggest an alternative solution instead of blindly rejecting everything? Sun bowed his head. I beg your Majesty's forgiveness. Then the emperor commanded. Summon the merchant quickly.
A merchant from the guild was brought in and knelt before the emperor. Your humble servant greets your Majesty.
The emperor stated. I've summoned you because the Crown Prince has a question for you. Answer honestly. Yes. Your Majesty. The merchant replied. Jin Ho spoke.
I've heard that your guild cannot produce the golden nib pens on time.
Why is that? The merchant explained.
Golden nib pens are delicate works of craftsmanship.
We must focus intensely to create each one. Even if we work faster. There are limits. Jin Ho inquired. So the entire process of making each pen is done by a single craftsman. Correct? Yes. That's correct. The merchant confirmed. A skilled craftsman must make each pen one by one.
The prince thought for a moment before turning to his father. Father, I have a solution. But I need to speak with the craftsman from the guild first. Once again, Sung vehemently protested.
Your Majesty. First a lowly merchant. And now the prince wishes to summon a mere craftsman to this esteemed place? Please reconsider.
The emperor, losing patience, shouted.
Grand Secretary. Be quiet. Why shouldn't I summon him when this concerns the affairs of the nation?
Sung, still displeased, tried to argue.
Your Majesty. But the emperor cut him off. If you continue to argue, I will begin to question your loyalty.
The room fell silent.
No one dared to object further. The emperor ordered.
Summon the craftsman. Once the craftsman arrived,
Jin Ho addressed them.
I've heard that each craftsman is responsible for every part of making the golden nib pens.
Is that true?
The group knelt and replied.
Yes. Your Highness. Jin Ho continued. I have a suggestion for all of you. Instead of having one craftsman do everything, why not divide the tasks? One person can shape the nib. Another can form it.
And a third can do the engraving.
What do you think of this change in how the pens are made?
The craftsmen exchanged surprised glances before responding.
It might be possible. Your Highness. We would need some time to adjust.
But once we're familiar with the new process,
it should be faster than what we're doing now. Jin Ho nodded. This is called the division of labor. When multiple people work together,
they can produce a larger quantity of products much more quickly.
The emperor was impressed. That makes sense. We will await good news from you. You may leave. After everyone left,
the emperor asked about labor division to increase productivity.
How did you come up with such a brilliant idea? Crown Prince?
The prince thought of a reason to respond.
When I visited the kitchen,
I saw the assistants and maids splitting tasks according to the head chef's instructions.
I remembered that and came up with this idea. The emperor laughed heartily.
This child came up with such a brilliant idea from things that others often overlook.
The crown prince truly is an extraordinary child. What do the ministers think? Everyone replied. We agree. Your Majesty. The crown prince is very wise.
However, Sung went against the majority and said, I believe the crown prince is focusing too much on trivial matters. Your Majesty should use his sharp mind to study the teachings of the wise men instead.
The emperor responded. Why do you consider the act of thinking and drawing meaning from things that others usually overlook as trivial? Didn't the wise men also ponder over things that are good for the nation and its people? Then share their thoughts. Why are you so narrow-minded?
Sung flustered, explained. I only want what's best for the crown prince.
Your Majesty. The emperor grew angry. Is this like what the crown prince mentioned the other day? That you think I and my ancestors are unworthy of ruling? Is that why you dare to speak such absurd things? Sung panicked, quickly explained. I would never dare have disloyal thoughts like that. Your Majesty. Please understand my intentions.
Another minister thought to himself. Indeed, Sung's words were a bit narrow-minded. But it's not worth the emperor suppressing him like this. It's common to show off a talented child. But using power to suppress those who disagree is unbecoming of a ruler. Jin Ho also thought. Father is revealing his true nature again. After a while, Jin Ho returned to the East Palace, closed the door, and sighed. That was tense. I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't come up with the example of labor division in time. He then reflected. Speaking of which, lately, Father has been calling for me often. I only wanted a bit of attention. But it seems I've dug myself into a hole instead. I didn't even realize that the concept of labor division didn't exist during this period. Even before Adam Smith mentioned labor division, it had been occurring naturally for a long time. However, turning labor division into an industrial principle was an agreement between absolutist monarchies and market regulation policies. What about Rajan? Although nominally an absolute monarchy, from a historical perspective, it's actually a struggle between the king, who wants to maintain absolute monarchy, and the officials, who favor a republican system. The people, on the other hand, want a semi-republican government. A king who loves the people more than the officials would ensure the people's interests are protected,
giving them true power. Success can't happen overnight.
I will have to build step by step to strengthen the king's power.
Father would also want to do this.
I need to ensure father's authority extends even to the of the kingdom.
And to do that, I need wealth. It's decided.
I will fill the treasury first. Then the crown prince left the East Palace and went to the main hall.
The emperor,
surprised,
asked, "Why have you come here?"
The crown prince replied, "I have something to discuss about the envoy preparing to visit the Ming dynasty.
There is something we need the emperor of the Ming to confirm."
Those present were astonished,
wondering in their hearts, what purpose does the crown prince have this time? Jin Ho said,
"I have something to discuss about the envoy to the Ming dynasty.
There is a matter that needs to be confirmed by the emperor of the Ming." The emperor, curious, asked, "What is it? What is going through your mind this time?" The crown prince smiled and calculated silently. The first step to filling the treasury is securing the monopoly on gold-tipped pens. We need to ensure that Roshan's merchants obtain the exclusive rights to trade gold-tipped pens in the Ming dynasty. The Emperor of Ming keeps demanding more of these pens from us, which clearly shows they value this item highly. The Ming dynasty is many times larger than Roshan. So, as I mentioned before, their demand for gold-tipped pens is much higher. He continued. Next, every time the Ming envoy comes to our country,
they demand a great deal of tribute. Therefore, we need to request an imperial edict limiting their demands.
Sun agitated, interrupted. Crown Prince, that is impossible. The Ming dynasty views Roshan as a vassal state. How dare a vassal complain about the demands of its suzerain?
That would be extremely disrespectful. The Crown Prince challenge.
How is it disrespectful? Does being from a larger country give them the right to bully smaller nations? Sun replied. That's not the point. If we suddenly reduce the tribute compared to what is customary, there will certainly be serious consequences. Jin Ho, feeling frustrated, thought, this old man is always opposing me. He then said aloud, do you know where all this tribute comes from? Isn't it the hard work of the people of our country? Moreover, the amount of tribute that the Ming dynasty demands keeps increasing, meaning that the food for our people is decreasing. At this rate, even the taxes that fill our national treasury will diminish. Shouldn't we address this danger before it happens? Sun responded. This is because the Crown Prince still doesn't fully understand state affairs. The people in the envoy are all eunuchs, the closest servants of the emperor. If they speak ill of us to the emperor of Ming, we could face grave danger. The Crown Prince replied. Do you really think the emperor of the Ming dynasty is that foolish? Sun stammered. That's not what I mean. I'm just afraid that your young age may lead to major losses in exchange for minor gains. The Crown Prince, now angry, shot back. What does this have to do with my age? And didn't you just say that we're risking a great loss for a small gain? Every time the Ming envoy comes, the tribute they take blocks roads for miles. Isn't that wealth they've stolen from our treasury and the people? He continued. Master Joseon, the ancient sage, once said that a true official ensures the people can live in peace. Yet you insist on bowing down and serving these eunuchs. What does that make you? Sun tried to respond. You're exaggerating, Your Highness. We are not bowing down. The Crown Prince interrupted. I haven't finished. Mencius once said that a righteous person, even when living in luxury, still shows compassion, even when seated in the highest position. They maintain their integrity, always adhering to the path of virtue and righteousness. Now, giving money and flattering these eunuchs, does that align with any of these three principles? If not, how dare you still call yourselves righteous gentlemen? Then the Crown Prince knelt down and earnestly pleaded. Father, please allow me to lead this envoy. This time, I will petition the Emperor of the Ming dynasty and do everything I can to put an end to this wrongful custom. Please grant me your permission. He continued. It's true that I am still young. Only 9 years old, but my determination is higher than the tallest mountain. The Emperor massaged his temples and said to the Crown Prince. The journey to Beijing is long and full of difficulties. The Crown Prince responded. The current situation of Roshan presents both a crisis and an opportunity. If we know how to take advantage of it, it could become the foundation for 1,000 years of development. But if we fail, we will remain a small, isolated nation. I hope father understands my intentions. The emperor sighed and said. Return to your palace. Crown Prince. Eunuchs. Escort him back to his chambers, he seems overly excited. Calm him down.
The Crown Prince shouted in desperation.
Please, father, let me go. I beg of you. Back in the East Palace. The Crown Prince. Frustrated. Yelled. Everyone. Get out. Damn it. I was too emotional. He sat alone in the hall. Deep in thought. That wretched son. He looks down on me because I'm young. Doesn't he? He's been nitpicking at me since last time. I won't sit idly by. Just wait and see. You scoundrels. Then he called out. Eunuch. Prepare for the journey to the Ming dynasty.
The eunuch was startled.
What? Why all of a sudden? I said. Prepare my things now. Meanwhile. Back in the main hall.
The officials were discussing.
We cannot act as the Crown Prince has suggested. Your Majesty. Please understand our concerns. The emperor sighed deeply and said. Do you know how much sleep the child gets each day? Never more than 6 hours.
A child of only 9 years old is already thinking of ways to make the country prosperous.
While all you can do is say no over and over.
The officials bowed their heads. Our sins deserve death.
Your Majesty.
Our sins deserve death.
Suddenly. A servant rushed in and reported. Your Majesty. There's an urgent matter. The emperor asked. What is it? The servant responded. The Crown Prince is preparing to leave. Everyone was shocked. What? Where is he going? The emperor, alarmed, asked. Where is the boy planning to go? A eunuch replied. It seems His Highness intends to leave for the Ming dynasty immediately. He said he cannot afford to delay even a moment if he truly cares for the country and its people.
The emperor, furious, slammed his hand on the table and shouted.
Why is that boy so insolent?
In a rage, the emperor stormed towards the Crown Prince's quarters.
Upon seeing 2 eunuchs leaving the chamber, he loudly called out. Hey, you two. Come here. The 2 eunuchs immediately approached. Bowing respectfully. Your Majesty. We greet you. The emperor questioned. Aren't you the eunuchs from the East Palace? Where are you going? One of them respectfully answered. We are on our way to the Office of Records. Your Majesty. The emperor asked. For what reason? The eunuch hesitated for a moment. Then stammered. Your Majesty.
We have been ordered to record all the tribute items that have been given to the envoys of the Ming Empire since the reign of the late King Taizhou.
The emperor, upon hearing this, was furious. And, with a fiery temper, growled. What? That insolent brat. Scene shifts to the empress's quarters. A servant hurriedly called from outside the door. Your Majesty. Empress. There's a major issue. The empress turned her head in surprise and asked. What is all this commotion about?
The servant, in a panicked voice, said. The Crown Prince is packing his belongings to leave for the Ming Empire.
Upon hearing this, the empress was truly alarmed and exclaimed. The Crown Prince is heading to the Ming Empire? Does he think it's like taking a stroll through the village? Why is this happening? The servant quickly replied. He said it's to stop the envoys of the Ming Empire from demanding excessive tribute. The Ministry of Justice officials said he's overreacting, and that's why the Crown Prince declared that he will go there himself. After a brief pause, the servant added. And the emperor is already on his way to the East Palace. Hearing this, the empress furrowed her brows, her face showing clear signs of tension and concern. She immediately left her chambers and hurried towards the East Palace. While running, she couldn't stop worrying. What on earth are you doing? My son? The servants, not understanding the situation but seeing the empress's urgency, quickly followed behind, calling out. Your Majesty. Empress. At the East Palace. The emperor, unable to contain his rage, pointed at the Crown Prince and shouted. You insolent child. What is this reckless behavior? The Crown Prince, with a firm voice, responded. I am not being reckless. I am doing what I must as the Crown Prince. Outside the hall, the ministers stood in a line, none daring to step inside. The emperor's angry voice still echoed. You brat! Do you even know how old you are? How can you act like this?
The Crown Prince replied.
Age is not a barrier to doing what's right. It's merely an excuse people use to claim someone is too young to take action.
The Emperor, growing even more furious, demanded.
Why are you acting so recklessly? At that moment, the Empress arrived, out of breath, and called out. Your Majesty. The Crown Prince, still refusing to back down, declared with determination. If father is the parent of our people, then I want to be their older brother.
Every time the envoys come and go, the people cry in distress.
As their elder brother, how can I remain silent? The Emperor, enraged by his son's defiance, gritted his teeth and shouted. You insolent child. Finally, he commanded.
Steward, bring me the whip and the punishment bench. The Empress and those outside were shocked and alarmed. In a state of panic, the Empress rushed into the hall, shouting.
Your Majesty.
The servants behind her, equally frightened, called out.
Your Majesty. Empress. As soon as the Empress opened the door, she cried out. Your Majesty.
The Crown Prince is only 9 years old. The Emperor, frowning, replied.
Precisely because he's young, he needs to be disciplined and taught. Empress. This is not for you to interfere in.
He then turned to the 2 eunuchs and ordered.
Eunuchs. Escort the Empress out of the room. The Empress, horrified, called out in desperation. Your Majesty. Before the 2 eunuchs could escort her out, the Empress made one final plea. Your Majesty. Please have mercy.
Each lash of the whip landed hard on the Crown Prince's legs.
With each strike, the Emperor angrily shouted. Your first mistake is being too arrogant with your limited knowledge. Your second mistake is disrespecting those who serve you and not knowing how to behave properly.
Though the Crown Prince was still young, he didn't cry or make a sound. He only gritted his teeth and endured the pain. By now, his legs were covered in red welts from the whip.
But the Emperor showed no sympathy and continued striking him while saying, Your third mistake is disregarding your father's orders. You must reflect on your actions today and make sure this never happens again.
Outside, the Empress, hearing this, had cried until no tears were left. The ministers, standing tensely outside the chamber,
anxiously looked toward the door.
Finally, the doors opened.
After the intense punishment,
the Emperor, breathing heavily, stepped out and ordered. Call the royal physicians to treat the Crown Prince.
Those present quickly responded in unison. Yes, Your Majesty.
As the Emperor walked past, he saw the Empress still sobbing and instructed her. Take care of the Crown Prince. Then he glanced at the ministers, leaving them with one final remark. You are all more petty than a mere child.
One of the ministers, unable to hold back, muttered. How could the Crown Prince act this way?
Another, noticing the Empress still nearby, warned.
Quiet, the Empress might hear you.
The Empress, her voice filled with anger, turned to the ministers and said.
You all, why couldn't you think as thoroughly as the child and let things get this bad? I will never forget what happened today. The ministers, lowering their heads, could only respond. We are to blame, we deserve punishment.
Later, in the Crown Prince's chambers, the Empress, while scolding the Crown Prince, repeatedly slapped his legs.
You little rascal, why do you always make me so worried? You can't behave this way. Do you understand? The Crown Prince cried out.
Mother, it hurts. Lying face down, the Crown Prince thought to himself. This hurts, whether in my past life or this one, my legs always seem to take the brunt of things. After a while, the Crown Prince was surprised to feel that his mother had stopped hitting him.
The Empress, heartbroken, wept quietly and then bent down to embrace him. Right now, this mother has no one else but you, my child.
The Crown Prince, hearing this, replied softly.
I'm sorry, mother.
Scene shifts to the royal court. The Emperor sat sternly, looking down at the officials gathered below. Then, turning to a eunuch, he commanded, Eunuch, bring the documents the Crown Prince told you to prepare.
The eunuch quickly responded. Yes, Your Majesty. Shortly after, the eunuch presented a stack of documents. After reading through the documents, the Emperor sternly said, the smallest amount of tribute they take is equivalent to 2 months' worth of our annual treasury. And the largest can reach up to 5 months. If we also count the tribute taken from smaller villages, the total could amount to nearly an entire year's worth of resources. He held up the records and questioned. Do you see this, ministers? Here is the list of tributes sent to the Ming Empire up until now. Year after year, the amount of tributes sent to the Ming Empire has only increased. What do you have to say about this?
Seeing their silence, the emperor angrily slammed his chair and shouted.
Why do you not respond? Even the crown prince, a child, has thought about this, yet you all cannot? The ministers, bowing their heads, responded in unison. We apologize, Your Majesty. The emperor then commanded, choose the envoy leader and assistants within the next 2 hours and report back to me.
If you cannot decide within 2 hours, I will charge you all with treason.
The ministers quickly replied, thank you, Your Majesty, for your grace. Later that night,
while the emperor was gazing at the moon, the voice of the empress broke the silence.
Your Majesty. He turned and asked, is something the matter, Empress?
She replied, I stepped outside for some fresh air because I couldn't sleep. After a brief pause, she hesitated before saying,
Your Majesty, why did you punish the crown prince so severely today?
I feel that you were harsher than usual. The emperor remained silent for a moment before answering.
The crown prince is an intelligent child. Hearing this, the empress looked up.
The emperor continued, however. There are times when he becomes too absorbed in his own intelligence.
Today, he faced opposition from the ministers. And that is what happened.
A tree that grows too straight can easily break.
Without the trust of the ministers, how can he properly care for the people? The empress remained silent, watching him.
The emperor added, I believe the crown prince was born with the qualities of a sage. Therefore, from now on, I will teach him as best as I can, guiding him down the right path. Upon hearing this, the empress smiled softly and replied, I cannot fully grasp the deep meaning behind your actions.
I have no other wish. As long as this is what you aim for.
After disciplining the crown prince harshly, the emperor had immediately ordered the ministers to select the envoy leader and assistants. Though the crown prince's actions were extreme, he had not spoken anything wrong. However, his extremity had surpassed the emperor's tolerance. And so the crown prince was punished for it. The crown prince rested his chin on his hand, sighing repeatedly, as he sat watching his two younger brothers playing in the courtyard. Particularly the one about his age. That child was an important figure. The boy who was playfully running around was IU.
My younger brother. However, he wasn't just an ordinary child because
in the near future, that boy would cause a bloody disaster in this very forbidden palace.
That boy will become the 17th king of Joseon. King Sejong. As far as I remember. After he kills the current ruler of this body, King Moonjong. And once Moonjong's nephew, King Danjong, ascends to the throne. He will lead the Jujongdan rebellion and eliminate all those who oppose him. During his reign, he won't stop there.
He will also poison his own brother,
Grand Prince Anpyeong. To give you a clearer picture,
the Jujongdan rebellion was a great uprising.
A coup in 1453.
Led by King Sejong to purge the close allies of the sitting king.
I remember my teacher once telling me about this man. Prince Suyong.
He abandoned both his younger brother and his older brother. Betrayed his own grandfather and father.
And cast a dark shadow over the prosperous era of the Joseon dynasty. Most historians view Grand Prince Suyong negatively. And this is something that deeply worries me. That innocent-looking brat will grow up to be a tyrant. Jinho pondered to himself. What should I do?
I had to do something before he shows signs of becoming that monster.
Suddenly,
Jinho smiled as an idea came to him.
I've got it. That's the best way to change someone.
He quickly grinned and approached his two younger brothers.
Thinking. With careful education and everything I've learned by road,
I'll make sure he serves under me until his death. His strange smile gave IU a sudden shiver.
Why did I just feel a chill down my spine? Jinho began his approach. First calling out. IU. Eon. Good morning. IU and IU were the real names of the two princes. Suyong and Anpyeong.
The two children politely bowed to him and responded.
Good morning, big brother. Jinho nodded warmly. I'm glad to see you both so happy.
He looked at his younger brother and asked.
IU. Your writing class is about to begin soon. Right? Do you want to study with me today? The odd question left IU confused.
He remained silent for a moment before asking.
Why?
Jinho, caught off guard by the question,
stammered in reply. Why are you asking that? I'm just curious to see how you're progressing with your studies.
But in his heart, he was thinking. Soon, you'll be working tirelessly under my command.
You won't have the luxury of being lazy like you are now.
IU furrowed his brows, showing disbelief at his brother's words. In the end, he decided not to agree. Turning his back, he said, "I'll study on my own." Despite Jihan's desperate call. IU. Wait. IU coldly grabbed his younger brother Ian's hand and said, "Come on. Let's go. Don't play there anymore. You're bothering our elder brother." Although IU didn't seem overly upset, there was a hint of displeasure on his face as he left. Time slowly passed into the afternoon. An eager IU ran towards the dining hall, excited for dinner. The maid following behind him gently reminded, "Young master, it's almost time for dinner. Running like that is dangerous." At a corner, IU overheard some servants whispering, which caught his attention, causing him to stop and listen. He quietly poked his head around the corner to eavesdrop. "Isn't the crown prince amazing?" one servant said. "So young. Yet he excels at literature already. Not only that, he's already aware of the country's major affairs. How could someone be born a prodigy like that? It's incredible." IU's ears perked up, hoping they would talk about him next. However, the more he hoped, the more disappointed he became. While the crown prince received endless praise, when the conversation shifted to him, it was filled with comparisons. Well, the eldest prince is bright too. But compared to the crown prince, they were born to be compared to each other. The words made IU tremble with anger. The maid behind him finally noticed and rushed over angrily. "How dare you speak like that?" The two startled maids, realizing they had been caught, immediately bowed and apologized. "Oh, dear heavens, we deserve death for this." Just as the maid was about to drag them away for severe punishment, IU intervened and pulled her back. "Let it go. Let's just leave." Though still a child, IU already understood disappointment. His expression was calm, but inwardly he questioned, "What have I done to be lesser than my brother?" A few days later, Jihan once again gathered his two younger brothers in his private chamber, trying to strengthen their bond. He proudly held up two self-made flashcards and exclaimed, "Tada, this is how this character is written. It's based on the sky and the earth." The cards, with one side showing a character and the other a drawing, looked incredibly attractive. Ion, delighted, shouted, "Wow, did you make these, brother?" Jihan replied proudly, "Of course, I had the eunuchs in the palace help make these cards. These cards were meant to help him spend more time with his younger brothers." Laughing inwardly, Jihan thought, "I had those eunuchs make these memory cards in a single day to help us remember these Chinese characters. Now learning will be so much more fun." He smiled and called out, "IU, come and have a look at these two." But IU, uninterested, declined, "I already have a tutor. So I don't need them." Jihan, confused, asked, "Wouldn't it be more fun if we studied together?" But before he could finish, IU reacted sharply, "I can manage on my own." He turned away, saying coldly, "Please don't call me for things like this again." His actions left both Jihan and IU surprised and puzzled. The next day, in the courtyard, IU sat with his tutor, studying diligently. Hidden behind the bushes nearby, Jihan crouched, watching them. "This kid is harder to figure out than I thought. I need to observe what he does every day," he thought to himself. The tutor asked kindly, "Don't you find this part difficult?" IU smiled and replied, "No, your teaching method is very clear. So I don't find it difficult at all." His polite and well-behaved demeanor left Jihan stunned. "What is this? He's much nicer than I thought. Is he only difficult with me?" The tutor continued, "Alright then, let's review the 3 fundamental relationships and the virtues of steadfastness that we studied yesterday." IU politely responded, "Yes, sir." He immediately began reciting loyalty of the subjects to their ruler. The king is the overseer of his people. The filial piety of a child to their parents. The father is the guardian and disciplinarian of the child. Note: overseer here refers to someone who manages and is responsible for discipline, similar to the modern understanding of a guardian or supervisor. IU continued to recite confidently, much to Jihan's amazement. The dedication of a wife to her husband. The husband is the overseer of his wife. Jihan couldn't believe what he was hearing. What is this? Not only has he mastered the 1,000-character script, but he's also memorized the 3 fundamental relationships and the 5 virtues of steadfastness. Jihan suddenly remembered something his tutor once said. There was a rumor about Grand Prince Suyong. People claimed that while Suyong was slightly less accomplished than King Moonjong, he was skilled in both literature and martial arts.
The only issue was that his older brother was too exceptional. But perhaps, at some level, this was just a rumor. Jihan seemed to realize something. He focused on the diligent child before him. What this kid needs is. That afternoon, during Seon's swordsmanship training, the boy was intensely practicing with a wooden dummy. As he struck the dummy, there was a loud noise that startled him, causing him to drop his sword. The heavy sword rolled across the ground and stopped at Jihan's feet. Jihan, picking up the sword, asked, "It looks like you're practicing martial arts, right?" Holding a wooden sword himself, he added, "How about you teach me some sword techniques? I don't know much about swordsmanship because, up until now, I've only studied the theory." IU, though slightly annoyed, didn't refuse. While swinging his sword, he simply said, "It's not that hard. You just do it like this." Jihan, standing beside IU, nodded thoughtfully and remarked, "It looks pretty difficult, doesn't it?" He raised his sword high and asked, "Do I do it like this?" But as the sword lifted above his head, Jihan lost control and fell backward, pulled down by the weight of the sword. "Ouch," he cried. Startled, IU called out, "Big brother." Lying on the ground, Jihan sighed. "Oh, man, just as I thought, it's not easy at all." Scrambling to sit up, he said, "I'd really appreciate it if you could teach your helpless big brother. I have no talent in this at all. Can you help me? I'm asking as a favor." IU furrowed his brows. Considering his brother's plea, he stayed silent for a moment, deep in thought. Then, suddenly, he burst into laughter, teasing, "Why are you so bad at this?" And so, under the setting sun, Jihan and IU grew a bit closer while practicing swordsmanship. Jihan constantly exposed his weaknesses and praised his younger brother. "Is this how you do it?" IU shook his head. "No, raise your hand a bit higher. Children are naturally simple-hearted." IU had always felt, no matter how hard he tried, that everyone around him said he wasn't as good as his older brother. This led to his feelings of dislike. But now, seeing that his older brother had weaknesses too, and was even worse than him in some areas, he felt a sense of balance return. With that, IU became more willing to let Jihan approach and began treating him more warmly. The first step in changing the future tyrant had been completed. One beautiful morning, two noble women were sitting together, chatting. The lady in pink whispered, "Have you heard about the memory cards that the crown prince made?" The lady in blue nodded and said, "Yes, I've heard about those. I've heard that they're quite useful." "Oh, really?" the lady in pink exclaimed. The lady in blue confirmed, "Yes, I've heard that studying has become much more enjoyable with those cards." The lady in pink began seriously thinking about the memory cards. "Do you think these memory cards could help my son learn Chinese characters more easily?" she asked. The lady in blue smiled and replied, "Perhaps, the power of word-of-mouth marketing is not to be underestimated." Later that same day, the lady in pink went to speak with her husband, who was a court official. "Husband, I've heard that the memory cards made by the crown prince are very useful." The official, surprised, asked, "How do you know about that?" Looking worried, she replied, "I found out by chance." "But do you think we should borrow those cards? I'd like to use them to teach our son." The official, stroking his beard, hesitated. "I'm not so sure." But the wife continued to push. "Why don't you ask the crown prince to borrow them?" The thought of an adult asking a child for something embarrassed him. So he wanted to refuse. "How would I save face?" he groaned. Immediately, his wife scolded him. "Is your pride more important than our son's education? This could impact the future of our family." As it turned out, this official wasn't the only one curious about Jin Ho's memory cards. Several other families were as well. So they banded together to request an audience with the young crown prince. When they expressed their desire, Jin Ho played hard to get, shaking his head. "Those cards were made for my younger brothers." The officials, desperate, pleaded. "Then please, sell them to us. Price is no issue. Just sell them to us." Jin Ho sighed and eventually relented. "If you want them that much, I suppose I have no other choice." He raised 3 small fingers in front of the officials, demanding a price of 3 sol, equivalent to 159 kilograms of white rice. The price was quite high, causing the officials to gape in shock. "What?" Jin Ho repeated. "Did you not hear me clearly? That's 159 kilograms of white rice.
One of the officials, sweating, stammered.
Does that mean these cards are worth 159 kilograms?
Jin Ho smiled and replied.
It's not that expensive. Really? He explained. One part of the cost is for the materials used to make the cards. Another part will be stored in the national treasury. And the final part is for my personal use. The officials hesitated for a moment before one of them asked. Your personal use? What exactly does that mean? Jin Ho, speaking reasonably, responded.
It's to buy books, because, for various reasons, the price of books is quite high. The officials silently looked at one another. Finally, one official, unable to wait any longer, spoke up.
Fine. I'll buy them. My wife has been pestering me about this recently.
Once someone took the lead, the others quickly followed, eagerly raising their hands.
I'll buy them too. I want the memory cards as well.
Many officials wanted to purchase the cards.
Jin Ho smiled happily and said. All right then. It's a deal.
Jin Ho was very satisfied.
Now I can fully pursue my passions. He thought. He had found a way to make money.
But there was still something more important he needed to address, his father's health. In the emperor's private quarters, a delicious meal had been served. The emperor looked around anxiously, making sure no uninvited guests were present. Only then did he lower his gaze to the plate of meat before him. The emperor reached out to grab a piece of roasted meat with his chopsticks. But suddenly, a loud voice rang out.
Father, startled, the emperor dropped the piece of meat. The young crown prince burst through the doors and demanded. Are you eating nothing but meat again?
Annoyed, the emperor grumbled.
What's this brat up to now?
Inside the chamber, the two began to bicker, neither backing down.
You know even a dog would be angry if its meal was interrupted. Right? The emperor growled. But eating healthy is one way to protect your health. The crown prince fired back. Outside, the eunuchs exchanged hesitant glances. Should we take him out of here? One of them whispered. Wait until His Majesty gives the order. Another replied.
Back at the dining table, the emperor, furious, slammed the table and yelled.
What did you say about my meal? Not healthy?
Look, he gestured to the dishes, 3 neat dishes. Roasted chicken, charred pork, and stir-fried beef with onions. Jin Ho bloodily picked up the plates and retorted.
Is this what you call healthy? It's all meat. And you haven't even touched any vegetables.
The emperor, unable to argue, stammered in response. This brat, this argument had become an everyday occurrence.
The maids knelt on the ground. Sighing. Crown Prince, please stop.
His Majesty has had it tough lately because of you. It all started when Jin Ho began obsessing over King Sejong's meals. He became overly concerned about his father's diet. During working hours, he would sneak in with a book in hand, droning on. If we look at the dietary regulations of the Yuan dynasty, a balanced diet with a variety of vegetables is necessary for a long and healthy life. He even went to the kitchen to instruct the cooks. Too much salt, redo this dish. Cut down on the meat. The kitchen staff, though reluctant, couldn't refuse him. Even during meals, Jin Ho would sit beside his father, muttering, too much meat will thicken your blood.
And what happens when your blood thickens? It stresses both your mind and body. And when the mind and body are stressed, what happens? If you're not careful, it could affect your head. And if your head is affected, what will happen to the nation? The country's stability will be at risk.
Every meal, the emperor had to listen to his son's constant nagging about one thing or another. All because it's for father's health. The servants could see the emperor's eye twitching in anger and knew he was about to reach his breaking point. The maids, still kneeling, braced themselves. The emperor they knew was about to explode. As they predicted, the emperor finally snapped, shouting, "You brat, I've been lenient with you because you're still young.
But I can't take it anymore."
The emperor pointed at Jin Ho and scolded, "You brat, stop interfering with my meals." Even a ghost, if it died after eating, would still have its own unique charm. Furious, he ordered. "Someone, take the crown prince out of here immediately.
Don't let him come near while I'm eating."
Jin Ho, helpless, was grabbed and dragged out of the room, only managing to call out, "Father." He thought to himself, I can't let this happen. If this continues, the old man will fall ill soon. He has to stay healthy so he can rule for a long time. Only then can I enjoy a comfortable future. He stood outside the emperor's quarters, stunned, while the servant who had dragged him out bowed and said, "My apologies, Your Highness." Jin Ho's mind raced, I need to do something.
His diet is a serious issue. What should I do to keep the old man healthy?
While Jinho was deep in thought, the emperor inside shouted, "Bring me more meat."
Suddenly, an idea hit Jinho. Oh, that's it, there's still one way. He quickly set to work on his new plan to improve his father's health. He went straight to the palace's professional woodworking shop to start the project. The woodworkers were kept busy for days and nights, tirelessly following his commands. It needs to be rounder. Jinho insisted. Yes, Your Highness. The craftsman replied. Constantly reworking the item. His odd behavior left everyone puzzled. Why is His Highness making us create such a strange thing? They wondered. From that day on, Jinho visited the workshop more frequently. Eventually, after much effort, the woodworkers presented the finished product to him. Your Highness, it's completed. But when Jinho held it in his hands and applied just a bit of pressure, the item broke in half. Furious, he shouted, "Not like this, make it stronger. Do it again, and make sure it's sturdier this time." The workshop echoed with Jinho's constant demands. Do it again, make it rounder, rounder. A few days later, Jinho confidently appeared before the emperor and the court officials, holding his new creation. The emperor, seeing him, sighed, "What now?" Jinho approached with both hands offering the new items and replied. I created these for your health. Father, this is a durable jump rope and a jingle bell. The emperor, skeptical, asked, Are these really good for my health? Aren't they just regular pieces of string? Jinho explained with a smile. No, father, this is no ordinary string. This is part of a brilliant plan to take care of your health. After working tirelessly day and night, Jinho presented the emperor with a jump rope and a set of bells as health management tools. This is a great way to help you stay fit. Father, Jinho said, it's called jump rope. The emperor, hearing Jinho's explanation, wasn't entirely convinced. How could jumping rope possibly make me healthier? He thought, seeing is believing. Jinho said as he grabbed his creation. Father, may I demonstrate how it works? The emperor nodded. Go ahead, I permit it. Jinho first put the jingle bell around his neck, then grabbed the jump rope with both hands. He began performing a basic jump rope routine, the kind that any modern person would know. In front of the entire court and the emperor. After a moment, Jinho stopped, panting. That's how you use the jump rope. But the emperor still didn't get it. How does this help my health? He asked, eyes wide with confusion. Isn't it just regular jumping? Are you saying this will make me healthier? Jinho, prepared to back up his claims, held up an English book and replied. Yes, father, according to Western scholars, people who sit a lot tend to have weaker lower bodies. But here, it says that jumping rope can strengthen your legs. Then, with a touch of mystery, Jinho leaned in and lowered his voice, glancing at the court officials before adding. There's another benefit. The moment he had piqued everyone's curiosity, Jinho played the part of the clueless child, saying, It's good for men, but I don't really know how to explain it. Bullseye. When it came to general health, most of the men in the court didn't pay much attention. But when Jinho hinted at the other benefit, suddenly everyone's ears perked up. Including the emperor's. The emperor, now serious, asked, Is that really true? Jinho nodded enthusiastically. Yes, father, I'm sure of it. The emperor's interest wavered. It looks odd, but it doesn't seem that different from regular jumping. And the boy says it's good for that, too. He asked again. So I just spin the rope and jump over it, right? Jinho nodded, pointing to the bell around his neck. Yes, just follow the rhythm of the bell, father. He then called over a servant steward. An elderly man stepped forward, bowing. Yes, Your Highness. Jinho removed the bell and handed it to the steward. Put this on the emperor. He instructed the steward. When father jumps rope, you must count 100 jumps according to the sound of the bell. The steward respectfully responded, Understood. Jinho, in a more emotional tone, said, My greatest wish is for you, father, to live a long and healthy life. At this point, the emperor could hardly refuse. He moved to an open area in the courtyard to practice. Jinho, delighted, said, Father, let me tie the bell on you. The emperor looked incredulous. Do I really have to wear this? Jinho carefully tied the bell around his father's neck. Yes, father, you need it to keep the rhythm. The emperor hesitated. But wearing this makes me look a bit like a pig, doesn't it? Jinho hadn't considered that. But once the emperor pointed it out, even he had to admit it was true.
He burst out laughing so hard that he spat out his drink.
The emperor, irritated, asked, "What are you laughing at?" Jin-ho, not willing to admit anything, replied, "Nothing at all."
"Father, all right, let's begin," he said, before starting the jump rope exercise.
The emperor hesitated. "Do I really have to do this? It doesn't feel right." Jin-ho reassured him. "You'll get used to it soon, father."
And so, the emperor reluctantly agreed to start. He swung the rope and attempted a few jumps. However, due to his round figure and lack of exercise, the emperor was out of breath after just a few jumps. He stopped and asked the steward.
"This isn't as easy as I thought. Steward, how many times did I jump?"
The steward, speaking honestly, replied, 9 times, Your Majesty."
The emperor was shocked. "Only 9? Turning to Jin-ho, the emperor tried to negotiate. "Since it's my first time, shouldn't we lower the number of jumps?"
The crown prince crossed his arms and shook his head.
"No, father, you have to keep trying. You must aim for more."
Jin-ho declared, "I will stay until you reach 100 jumps."
This declaration nearly brought the emperor to tears.
Over time, the story of the emperor's diligent jump rope exercises became the talk of the palace. One day, a group of officials gathered, whispering among themselves.
One of them rushed over. "Are you all still here?" 2 royal physicians, standing nearby, asked, "What's the matter?"
The man, with a serious expression, said.
The emperor just coughed. One of the physicians, puzzled, replied, "Doesn't His Majesty usually cough around this time?"
The man, looking grave, said, "That's not the point. The important thing is that right after he coughed, he ran to use the plum blossom chamber pot." For context, the plum blossom chamber pot is a special royal chamber pot designated for the emperor. This news was quite shocking because ever since the emperor began his daily jump rope routine, King Sejong had undergone significant changes.
In the past, he only had a bowel movement once every 3 days. But now he was going every day.
The palace maids had even congratulated him on his improved health. Not only that, but he could stay up late to handle court documents. And, for some reason, he had been visiting the queen's quarters more frequently than before. The queen's quarters, of course, being where the empress resided.
Rumors quickly spread among the officials. "Have you heard? The emperor has been jumping rope.
And he uses the plum blossom chamber pot right after he coughs. His complexion has also improved a lot recently."
It all seems to be connected.
One of the officials whispered, "Don't tell me, it's because of the jump rope." Another nodded in confirmation.
"It seems so." They sighed and shared their own health concerns. "These days, I haven't been feeling too well." "Same here. I haven't been sleeping well at all. And my wife has been complaining every night."
As soon as they finished speaking, they exchanged knowing glances.
One afternoon, while the crown prince was quietly studying,
a distressed voice suddenly called out, "Crown Prince."
Jin-ho was startled and looked up.
In front of him were all the court officials, gathering and approaching him.
In a panic, Jin-ho asked, "What's going on?"
The officials were blunt.
"Can you make more jump ropes, please?"
"You can ask for as much rice as you want, we'll pay. I want to buy one for my wife and children."
One official started talking over another.
"And I need one for myself,
too."
The scene turned chaotic, like a classroom full of preschoolers. Jin-ho raised his voice.
"Please, one at a time, speak one by one." This success far exceeded Jin-ho's expectations. He returned to the woodworking shop and told the workers, "We have a lot to do now. So from now on, everyone will be assigned specific tasks. One person will make the ropes, another the handles, and another the bells."
The workers, tears welling in their eyes, resigned themselves to their fate.
Crown Prince exploiting labor. Then Jin-ho announced, "Now, start making 500 more."
In their hearts, the workers were in despair. "Please just kill us already.
We're human too."
But it didn't stop there.
Jin-ho pulled out another design and said, "I also need you to make this." The artisans, worried, wondered, "What now?"
He handed the design to a servant and instructed, "Take this to the royal tailors."
The servant asked, "What is this, Your Highness?"
Jin-ho explained, "Well, it's uncomfortable to jump rope in skirts.
So to make it easier for people to move,
I came up with this, exercise pants." Jin-ho's combo of products created a revolution in the health of the court families.
Now, the entire household would jump rope together, with healthier husbands and happy wives. Families across the nation were joyful.